Hello, hi. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Ida Cutler. I'm a bookseller at Women and Children First. Women and Children First is one of the last remaining feminist bookstores in the United States. We're located in Chicago, Illinois. I want to thank you all so much for being here tonight. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that this event is happening on the homeland of several tribal nations, the Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Odawa. The Sac, Fox, Miana, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee have also called this area home. We recognize these nations as the traditional occupants of the land and its importance for the 65,000 indigenous people still here today. Furthermore, it is in WCF's mission to use books as tools for liberation and amplify underrepresented voices. And with this land acknowledgement, we recognize that this means developing and furthering a longstanding commitment to include books that include information on the ongoing legacies of indigenous peoples, their dispossession, and the white settler colonialism that our store has benefited from. Tonight is my honor to be hosting the virtual event, celebration of the paperback launch of Everywhere You Don't Belong by Gabriel Bump. Yay! Everyone cheer in their homes. Yeah! Look at that cover. Gabriel Bump grew up in South Shore, Chicago. His nonfiction and fiction have appeared in Slam Magazine, The Huffington Post, Spring House Journal, and other publications. He was awarded the 2016 Deborah Schlossberg Memorial Award for Fiction. He received his MFA in fiction from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. He is joined tonight in conversation by Melissa Faliveno. Melissa Faliveno is the author of the debut essay collection Tomboyland, named by NPR, New York Public Library, and Electric Literature as the best book of 2020. Her essays and interviews have appeared in Esquire, Paris Review, Bitch, Ms., Lit Hub, and Brooklyn Rail, among others, and received a notable selection in Best American Essays. The former senior editor of Poets and Writer magazine, she has taught nonfiction writing at Sarah Lawrence College and is the 2021 Keenan Visiting Writer at UNC Chapel Hill. Before we begin, I just want to say that if you have still yet to order Everywhere You Don't Belong or Tomboyland or any other book, you can do so at any time by clicking that little teal button that you see on your screen that says buy the book. Right down there, yes. We're currently offering curbside pickup at our store, and we do shipping. So if you're not local, that's a great option. You can learn more about how that works on our website, womenandchildrenfirst.com, as well as read about other events that we are very fortunate to be able to continue to do even in these socially distant times. During the event, there's going to be a Q&A at the end. So if you have a question for our authors, you can click that Ask a Question feature just below the Buy the Book button, or you can drop it in the chat as well. We will get to the questions, like I said, at the end of the event. And so please ask a question. Great. Without further ado, I'm going to get out of here, and I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful authors.
Thanks, Ida. Hey, Melissa.
Hey, Gabe, what's up?
Oh, nothing. Just hanging out. Fancy.
Out on the internet, celebrating the paperback release of your book.
Yeah. So thanks so much for agreeing to do this. I'm a big fan of Tomboyland and your work, and mainly just kind of want to have a conversation with you about writing and craft. And so I don't know, maybe I was thinking that I could just start off by reading a short passage, and then we can jump into the conversation.
Sounds great.
Sounds great? All right, cool. Yeah. So for all of the uninformed, this is my book, Everywhere You Don't Belong. It's a coming-of-age story set in the south side of Chicago in the 90s and early 2000s. And it follows a young man, Claude McKay Love, as he just tries to find his place in the world. He struggles with love, with school, with purpose, like we all do, regardless of where we're from or what we look like. But I think that, Claude's story is particularly poignant, at least for me. One of the reasons I want to tell it is because, like, when you're just a kid with brown skin in America, it's hard to just focus on like everyday kid anxieties when you also are surrounded by the system that doesn't necessarily care if you thrive, live, or die. And so a lot of the books just deals with Claude trying to figure out, how to balance finding himself, how to balance being a person of color in America, and how to fall in love, I guess. It's kind of like a love story. So I'm just going to read the final page here, and it's short. And don't worry, there's no like spoilers at the end. We don't find out who the real murderer is. So this is where we belong. Sometimes when it's morning and we're both tired, I stare across the table and see Janice again in Juno's back seat. I see her hair rattling in the wind. I feel my hand on her knee, held there for hours and miles. I see her on the beach, picking up empty shells. I hear her kicking sand. I smell salt on her shoulders. I turn to her whenever the future frightens me, the present frightens me, the past ambushes my peace and sleep doesn't come. When the sun rises and Janice looks right at me, I see them all in her eyes. Grandma and Paul, happy, laughing, waving, safe. Everyone in South Shore, safe and happy. They're okay without us. They forgive us for leaving. We're okay too. Yes, right where we belong. Say where you don't belong.
Yay. I want you to read so much longer than that.
No, let's get to
the
conversation.
Fine.
Yeah.
I just want to listen to you read for an hour, actually. That was so beautiful. Thank you for reading that. I actually, when I read this book, when I got to that last section, I read it like 3 times in a row. I just went back and I read it again and I read it again. And that was actually how I felt about the whole book. And I think I told you this in an email, but this doesn't happen very often with me, that I finish a book and I immediately want to turn it to the front page and start reading again. But that's how I felt about this book.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Well, I mean, the feeling's mutual, I think, like after your work. But thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
No, we're just going to be really Midwestern and like, no.
Just no, that's not all compliment.
There's so much I want to ask you about this book and so much I want to talk about, but I know our time is limited, so I'm going to try to be selective about my questions. But if at any time you want to like jump in and like just steer, let's do that.
Yeah.
It's such a pleasure to be here, and like just such an honor to be a part of this release with you. And I didn't know about this book until, maybe, I don't know, a few months after it had come out. And then I was able to see Gabe give a reading. For those of you out there watching, by the way, thank you for coming. I am currently teaching at UNC, and at the time Gabe was in like final interviews for a position teaching at UNC, and he came and did a virtual reading, and I was just like, he read one section from this book, and I was just enwrapped, and also kind of had that feeling, which is rare and wonderful, where you just feel like you're in the presence of somebody that you just really like. and want to hang out with and want to read all of their work forever. And that's just how I felt immediately. So when you asked me to be part of this, I was like, oh my God. So geeky.
Yeah, it's really sweet. Thank you. Yeah.
But one of the things I loved about this, I mean, there's so much I love about this book, but one of the things I loved about it so deeply was how you write about place. And obviously this is a book about belonging, coming of age, finding our place, finding our people, finding out what home means to us, where we fit in. But place plays such a big role, and specifically Chicago, the South Side of Chicago in the 90s and early 2000s, Missouri. These places seem to not just be backgrounds to the book, but kind of serve as their own character, which is something that I just really love in writing and really appreciate. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how place, what the role of place plays in your writing, how really this book kind of came to be. Did it start while you still lived in Chicago? What was the germination? Like, tell me all about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess like, and his place, I think, is, important to your work too. And I think like it's the most important thing about my work, or like it was certainly for this book and like the other kind of books I'm working on. I don't know if it'll be forever. Like I might run out of places to write about. But, like I started writing Everywhere You Don't Belong after I just transferred back to Chicago when I went to school at the University of Missouri for 2 years. And I guess like a combination of like dropped out, didn't like it, just didn't really fit in down there. And so I went back to Chicago, just like hung around, worked in some restaurant jobs for a semester, and then went to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago just to study writing, which I guess I didn't know that you could do, but like I had this like mutual friend like went to SAIC and was like, hey, there's like a writing program here. You can just come here and write. I said, all right. And I had nice enough parents that allowed me to, that didn't tell me that was really, well, they cautioned against it, but didn't strong enough, I think. And it was in like those early writing workshops where I like started messing around with these characters, particularly Claude and Grandma. And I guess like how this fits into the question about place and the importance about place is, I guess like most people in their early 20s or all their 20s or their entire lives, right? Like I was just feeling really adrift, I guess, like at that point. And I don't know, it's like if I'm gonna write something, like I want to write something that's unique and something that's important. And there weren't, that I could find, any books like short stories or novels like set in my neighborhood in Chicago. And I thought my neighborhood was pretty cool. Right. And it was like really important to me. And like I could see it really clearly in my head. I feel like if, and you probably know this too, coming, from Wisconsin, but it's like Chicago is pretty much like Stuart Diebeck and Stuart Diebeck.
Yep.
Like, the person that like has the voice down, and there aren't many Sandra Cisneros, like that house on Mango Street. But like in terms of like Black Chicago, there weren't, I don't know, like not that I could find or was being taught to me. So I just figured I might as well just try and write a Stuart Diebeck short story set in Southside Chicago with all Black characters and see what happens. And this kind of happened, I guess, this book. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so glad you did. And you use that word unique, and I just can't stress enough how I felt like reading this book was like encountering something brand new. It just felt totally original, like in voice, in form. it was something I haven't read either. And it's like, I read it in a fever in like 2 or 3 sittings. And in each of those sittings, I cried sometimes. I laughed out loud in every sitting. Like, this book is very funny. It's also incredibly emotionally powerful. It just did all of this stuff that I don't encounter very often. And it also was so propulsive. It felt a little like, definitely I See the Steward Dieback. But it also felt like reading Jesus' Son by Dennis Johnson. It was just like this wild ride, very propulsive, super urgent, you know, and yeah, it just feels like something everybody needs to read, and I hope that they do.
Well, and I think that like the Jesus Son thing is like I was reading and rereading Jesus Son like when I was in grad school, right? Like, and
as you do in grad school.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like most people in grad school that first approached Dennis Johnson, it's like, what part of this can I steal and make my own? Right? Like, what is there's so many awesome elements here. Like, which of these elements can I steal? And like put together. And I mean, for me, it is that like just wildness that can happen, and like how he's able to move between just kind of insanity and the mundane, and like just the whatever sacred and the profane, like just this weird constant juxtaposition happening in the work.
Sorry.
Yeah. No.
There were just so many moments where like these scenes that stuck out and that I think will stay with me for a long time. Like early in the book, this scene where, well, I don't want to give anything away, but like one of the characters comes out in a bathrobe and he's just sort of like bombastic in his whole situation. And like, I don't know, the characters themselves and these scenes that feel, they have that kind of zaniness, that zany quality to them, but they feel anchored, you know, in a very real time and place and experience. And it was just, you know, I think that's part of what makes this book so powerful, is it's filled with these images and scenes and situations that are wholly unique, but also I think so many people will connect with them regardless of what, you know, your experiences were growing up, where you grew up. Like there's so much there that is so deeply connective. And like you said, everybody deals with the same sort of longings when it comes to love and connection and belonging and home. And
yeah, I mean, like a lot of it's just about being a teenager, right? Yeah. Being a teenager is hard, man. Like being like 14 to 17 is
so like hard. We forget. We forget. This was a great reminder.
Yeah, because you don't know what to do. Like, I don't know. Like, I think at whatever age we are now, right? Like, life is still confusing, and like, there's no right way to do it. And like, when you're a teenager, like, you really don't know what's right or wrong. And and then like on top of that, you have like, you know, cops killing kids your age and wondering like if this is going to be me next, right?
Yeah.
It's bizarre. I mean, it's a really weird way to grow into the world, I guess.
Yeah. That was another thing that really stuck with me, is sort of the way that this book deals with this feeling of being kind of stuck, kind of in between, neither here nor there. Like on, you know, there's this really powerful scene where this like gang that's coming into town, the Red Belters, are, you know, facing off against the cops, and Claude is standing there with his family, unsure of what to do, and he's like having this internal dialogue, like, which side am I on here? And it felt like that was a perfect metaphor for the whole book, like this kind of like, where do I fit? What, you know, what does it mean if I am neither this nor this? How do I find myself in like a community, in a place, in a, you know, in a relationship? That sort of in-betweenness really came through, and being conflicted and not knowing what is right or wrong, which I think is also such a huge thing when you're a teenager, you know, like not knowing what's right, what the right thing to do is. And that just came through so clearly throughout the whole book, you know, that he's just trying to figure it out.
Well, and then, I mean, this is like a similarity, I think, between our work, right? Like, at least in some way, it's like, you know, we have, like, we just have these questions about like ourselves, right? It's like, well, who am I, right? Like, where do I fit? And then, like, even working through our internal like questioning and our internal messiness, right? Then you have society saying, well, you are this, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have like friends saying, well, like, you are this. And it's like, well, I don't feel like that all the time. Like, I might feel like that sometimes, I guess. Like, identity is complicated, right? And then I try to really narrow it down. And so I guess, like, in the riot, it's like a young man is killed by a police officer, and then like a riot erupts in the neighborhood. And during that riot, it seems like things are set up in like two camps, right? It's like the people that like want to burn the place down out of anger, and the people that like want the cops to protect them or trying to get people to come home. But what I think like Claude's perspective in all that is like, Claude's just trying to find his family, right? Just trying to make sure his family's okay, right? And like, and it's how do the people that, and I feel like that's kind of most people in those situations, right? Like, you just kind of care about your family, right? Like, absent from how I feel about these issues or anything like that. But I don't know. That's how I don't think I agree. Like, I'm not Claude, right? Like, I don't agree with him on anything, but I think like that I became obsessed with his perspective because his only agenda is like, what do I do tomorrow? Right. Like, how do I feel happier? Right? Like that kind of stuff. And I don't know. I feel like there are a lot of Claudes in the world. I'm Claude most days, I guess. Yeah,
well, okay. So this leads me to another question that I have, burning question. So, you know, I'm a nonfiction writer, so obviously I put myself on the page in a way that's like makes me wonder why I would ever be compelled to do it. But you know, there are a few things where, you know, when someone reads your bio, they intersect, namely that you grew up on the South Side, you went to Missouri. So what I'm wondering is, you know, where Gabe and Claude intersect, and particularly like within the writing of the book. Like, was there sort of a moment where when you started writing, your life intersected with Claude's and then it diverged? Like, how did that process look? Where were those intersections, and how did the divergences happen? Or, you know?
Yeah, no, I think it's like pretty interesting. And one, like, I commend all you nonfiction writers. Like, I have a hard time writing whatever essays that like tries to. I'm like, I am gonna have a panic attack, let alone like the whole book, right?
It's terrible.
You know, I think there's nowhere to hide. You know, you gotta get like facts right. You know, like you gotta get facts right. But I guess I can just start with, you know, the genesis of this book. Like go back. So it's dedicated to my grandmother, and like the grandma is loosely based off of my like maternal grandmother, who I didn't really know that well, like when I was growing up, until I moved back to Chicago, and she was living back in Chicago, essentially. Well, I guess fighting a losing battle with an illness, and so I got to know her really well as she was dying. Right, like, you know, over a couple of years, I guess she was dying, and when I mentioned like writing these short stories, like, and having just Claude and Grandma, in those short stories, Claude was pretty close to me, right? Like they were kind of set in this weird time before I'd went back to school, and like but it was just me and her. Like I just wanted to imagine this like story where it was like just me being raised by my grandmother, like in the house that I grew up on. So that's how it started. And then I think like pretty soon into the writing, I was like, yeah, Claude can be more interesting than I can, right? Like his family can be more interesting. And yeah, I mean, like in terms of stuff that happens, you know, like not much of the stuff happened to me in like any degree, but like emotionally, I think I'm everywhere in this book, right? Like I'm just kind of in every character. Like there's a scene where at a dinner where some adults are arguing about basketball, and like those are like arguments I have like with myself, I have with my friends, right? Like, and like anyone that kind of knows me would recognize that. And yeah, I mean, because my like beyond place, right? Like what interests me about fiction is you can make all this wild stuff happen.
Yeah.
Right? But like you can imagine things. Like you can imagine this basketball player that like cures violence like with his dunks, right? Like you can just take these leaps that I just really like doing, right? I don't, you know, I'm not.
That was one of my favorite chapters of the book, by the way. Jonah.
So that was like one of the first chapters. Like I got to grad school. I think like it was Bubbly and Nugget and Jonah and the Dunk were like the short stories I wrote just like first semester, like back to back. And I think that's when like my mentor and like close friend now, like Jeff Parker, was like, dude, you just turn this into a book. Like, what are you doing? Like, I was just writing. I was like, I really love Bubbly Nugget. Like, I really love Jonah. Like, I really love Claude. And I think he could tell. And he just said, yeah, dude, write a book then. Like, what do you like turn this into a novel? So, yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thanks, Jeff. If you're here, wherever you are.
Yeah. Everyone knows Parker a lot.
That was.
I don't know.
There's so many lines that I underlined in this book, and I don't know if people can see this, but when I underline and star a section, that's how you know. You know that I'm like really vibing on it. But the end of that, it's actually not the end, but I just want to read a brief section because it's just such poetry, and it's such a great example of the writing in this book. So if you haven't all read it, please do. So I'm not going to give you any context. The sun went down. We walked back in reverie. I noticed beauty in everything. The warped chain link fence, the tags on the bus stop advertisements, the glimmer from broken glass in the gutter, the breeze carrying sewer smells. I could go on, but it's just like, your writing is so beautiful. It's so lyrical. And then there are these like super like perfect mundane turns. Like it's like beauty, it's poetry, and then there's the sewer smell, which I think also really relates to the use of humor in this book, which is, I just want to talk about a little bit because it's to me, it feels like such a feat, like being able to write a book like this that made me laugh out loud so often, and that also packed such a powerful punch. So I'm just, on a craft level more than anything, like so curious how you write humor, like how it works its way into your dialogue. Does it just come? Are you just funny all the time, or like you have to work on it? I mean, how do you?
I don't think I'm funny. I mean, like it's just I think like a lot of the humor in here is kind of like unintentional. It's just me thinking like a ridiculous thing that I actually think and like putting it down, and it's kind of, and people kind of laugh at it. I feel like that's been my experience with humor. But in the cases where like I am intentionally trying to like make a joke, even though I think there's not many, you know, jokes with like punchlines in this book, right? Like, I think just the humor is having a ridiculous character say the right thing at the wrong time, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, like a lot of it comes through in dialogue. And so like if Paul or just someone like overreacting, like those are just kind of the notes you try to hit, right? Like present a somewhat mundane situation and have a character like overreact, and usually it'll be kind of funny, like a ridiculous way, like within character.
It worked.
Well, I mean, like in the I guess I don't totally, know how to differentiate how I approach writing about like sadness and humor. Right? It's not like there's a gear that's like turning, or I'm intentionally like doing one. I think like my goal is to try and I don't know, like depict life like in a true emotional way, right? Like, even if like people are like flying in outer space, like life isn't all happy or sad, right? Like, oftentimes we like laugh through the saddest moments, right? And like I think that I don't know, that's just a wonderful thing that can become like really poignant in fiction, because it's like laid out there. Like if you experience a tragedy and someone tells a really nice joke and you start laughing, like chances are you might, forget that joke, or like forget that you laughed in this tragedy. Like you'll just remember the tragedy. But I think that like fiction gives us this awesome avenue to, I don't know, just lay out humanity and all its twistedness.
Yes. And all its complexity. And I feel like that's the reason this feels so refreshing, I guess. That's a weird word, but like, I don't know. It just feels like you have captured humanity and all of its messy complexity in all of these characters who I want them all to be real people that I know. I feel like I know them. It's just, you have captured those moments in human interaction, I think, that are really hard to capture in writing. Particularly those moments of laughing through something horribly traumatic or frightening or, violent, and finding the absurdity in those moments and the humor in those moments. So great job.
Thanks.
I'm in awe.
I guess like we all, like I think writers have different goals, right? And like just bring it back to like Dennis Johnson, right? Like I think that that's a really worthwhile goal that I tried to see him accomplish, right? Like show the messiness, but like show it with the beauty. It's another thing to steal, I guess. Another thing I've stolen.
Maybe, but you've made it your own. So it's fine.
Well, we all steal. Everyone's stealing.
I think we have time for like one more craft question before we turn it over to the questions. And just a reminder, dear audience, if you have a question, please put it in the Ask a Question box and we will get to those questions next. Please come at us with your questions. So one thing I want to kind of geek out about just for a little bit is the structure of this book, if we can get a little crafty. I love the structure of this book. It is like, one of the things that makes it different, that makes it really compulsively readable, I think, is that it's made up of these short kind of vignettes. Like each chapter reads like a vignette, and you could read them as standalone stories. Many of them, I feel like, could be read as standalone stories, and just function as like this beautiful standalone moment, which I think is so cool, and so it's just so beautifully done too. So I'm wondering how that kind of structure happened. If you knew you wanted to write this book that way, if you had a kind of idea that these vignettes would make this tapestry, or if they all kind of came organically.
Well, thanks for liking the structure. I guess like it is weird, and I think that it's like so the first part, like really, it's vignettes, like short stories, if you want, like short chapters that like follow Claude from like 4 years old to like 18. Right, so it's 5 to 18, so like 13 or 14 years. This like takes over the first half of the book, And then the second half, we just like slam on the brakes, and it's like 3 months, right? Like when Claude's in college.
Yeah.
And I mean, some of the structuring was intentional, right? Like I wanted to write like I knew I wanted to write a coming of age story. Like I liked the idea of writing a lot about this person's life, like following them from step to step. Because I feel like each age, like the friends we meet, like the lessons we learn are like really important to describing like how we are when we're 18.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I mean, but like some of it was just I was writing these short stories, right? And it was like for whatever reason I was jumping in time. And I'm sure there's some, there's probably some Jesus son like related thing to that, like time moves there, but like the jumps here are like bigger, right? And so I can't really go back and say exactly what inspired me to do it. But definitely with the second half of the book, when we just slam on the brakes, like I actually had to like in some cases fight to keep that second half of the book. Like a lot of people, luckily, like Algonquin was just like, okay, we'll ride with this. But there were publishers that said, no, we just want them to stay in Chicago, like, stay with these characters. And for me, like the importance of having him go to Missouri is because I mean, like people leave Chicago, right? Like if you want to go to an affordable like state school, and you're a high school senior, it's like most of the time you have to end up somewhere in the middle of nowhere, like outside of the city, like in a place like Missouri, Madison, right? Like Urbana, Ann Arbor. And I, just from my experience, like, 'cause it was so important to who I am today, like my experience being a Black person from Chicago in the middle of Missouri, like in many ways, like shaped who I am today, right? Like dealing with that culture shock, dealing with trying to figure out who I am. So I really want to like slow down there and like, just, I don't know what, like show Claude also as an 18-year-old, like his thought process is different, like show Claude like thinking more, there's more interiority. So like all things crafty, like in hindsight, I can kind of explain some of it, but a lot of it just came from like messing around, right?
Yeah.
Like riffing, like editing stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I guess because this is kind of interesting now, like in one version of this novel, like there was like a section where like Claude and his dad like meet up, like 10 years down the line and like are having a conversation. And so a lot of stuff that's also weird just gets cut.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel right. Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad we ended up going to Missouri too, because it does just circle back to the beginning, this discussion about place, it really helps illustrate that, like the way that place defines, complicates an identity, a sense of self, leaving and staying and returning, and, how that in and of itself helps us figure out who we are, I think, and who we're not.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. Should we turn it over to questions? Audience questions?
That's fine.
How do you feel? It looks like we have one so far from Claudia. What books would you recommend for those interested in learning to write short stories?
Oh, well, thanks for the question, Claudia. Oh, yeah, both the books, too, I see up there. That's nice. Well, Melissa, where do you have favorite collections?
Well, we talked a lot about Jesus' Son tonight,
yeah,
which
exactly.
I highly recommend. That's one of my favorite short story collections. I don't know. I feel like you have a much richer education in the short story form.
No, well, I guess like Coast of Chicago by Stuart Tybeck. I think it's like an amazing collection. And like the George Saunders collection, I mean, particularly like Civil War Land and Bad Decline.
Yeah.
And 10th of December, the more recent one. Like great short story collections. I went through, well, I guess like what I would like recommend, Claudia, and like anyone that's interested in short stories is if you find a short story writer that you like really like, just buy all their books and like read all their books, because I feel like if you really feel in tune with the short story writer's voice, it's most likely you'll like everything they've written. I feel like that's at least something I've found to be true.
For sure.
Like Edgar Carrot, like I could just read all of Edgar Carrot's like short stories all the time. Grace Paley, Once is such a good short story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who Rebecca Curtis.
I've never read Rebecca Curtis.
Fish Rot's really cool.
Good to know. Okay. I thought of a couple other ones too that I really loved. In the last couple of years, a book came out by Lucia Berlin called A Manual for Cleaning Women.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It was so good. It's amazing. And it was published posthumously, I believe, by her one of her kids.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh man, it's just incredible. I loved that book. That's probably one of my favorite story collections of the last several years. Also, Carmen Maria Machado's Her Body and Other Parties.
Don Teal. God, what's Don Teal's last name? Do you know?
Her book came out today, right?
Yeah. Her book came out today. I think that is Milk, Blood, Sweat, Heat.
That sounds right.
Milk, Blood, Heat.
Milk, Blood, Heat, I think.
Milk, Blood, Heat.
Yeah.
Milk, Blood, Heat. Yeah, Don Teal Moniz. Amazed, like everything I've read from her so far is amazing. And there's no doubt that I'm also going to devour the book when I get my hands on it.
Yes. Great question from Spencer. Did you do any research regarding police brutality in Chicago in the 90s, 2000s while writing the book?
Yeah, well, hey Spencer, thanks for coming. I did a lot of research on like gangs and police activity like in high school before I started writing this book. Like I wrote for my high school newspaper, and like, I don't know, this was when there was a huge spike in violent crime in Chicago, and I was like, well, what's going on? Like, as an 18-year-old, like, why is this happening in my neighborhood, not in other neighborhoods? So, I mean, like, you know, I interviewed gang members, interviewed cops, and so, like, my experience with the system and, in my opinion, the broken system, is from like reporting, right? And then like following up and following trends, like seeing what works, what doesn't work. And yeah. So a lot of my research is kind of like lived too, I guess. It's like a mixture.
Which that really comes through in like the sort of like the cultural references of the time too, like obviously all of the Bulls references, Michael Jordan stuff, which as someone from Southern Wisconsin who was a Bulls fan, like I totally geeked out. Like we all just ignored the Bucks, which I was thinking about now, like, wow, why did we do that? But
the Bucks were fine.
The poor Bucks.
Well, Bucks are like good now, really good now.
You can't compete, I guess, when, you know, in 90s Bulls, but so that I loved all of that, you know, and that like, you know, fills in that kind of like showing a zeitgeist of a time in a city, you know, a place, and then Obama, both like as local politician, local hero, you know, and then running for president, winning, like this is also this backdrop of the characters and the characters coming of age. And so I feel like that's a really important part of the book too.
Yeah. I mean, all that stuff is important. Well, it's impossible to like write about the city without talking about
Yeah.
Like, or I'd like to see someone try, I guess. Maybe I should have tried, but just didn't seem possible.
I'm glad you did. Wow. That's important. Okay, we have another one from John. It sounds like you lived with these characters for a long time through short stories and other forms before they existed in the form of a novel. Did the shift in medium require rethinking them or your relationship to them in any way? Great question.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think it's a great question. And short answer, yes. I get like longer answer. Like in a novel, you have to like really decide which characters you're going to know really well, like which character is going to be there from beginning to end. And I think that was kind of hard for me and was difficult, especially in the first drafts, to like really figure out where the heart of the story was. Like I knew that Jonah was just going to be there for a chapter. I knew that like Bubbly and Nugget were just going to be there like for a chapter, like Chester, Dexter, all these people. Like initially I thought like Janice was just going to be there for the first half of the book. And then in the second half, like Claude was supposed to and originally like fell in love with somebody else. Like it was like totally different than Janice. But wisely, like my agent, you know, after reading drafts was just like, Gabe, like this, like put Janice back in here, at least like Janice seems like really important. And I was like, okay. And I put her in like one chapter in Missouri, and then I don't know, we should all be lucky to have smart agents that know more than us. Cause like she was right. Janice is the heart of this story, right? So it's Claude like finding this person who's also complicated, like falling in love and finding like not necessarily a romantic partner, right? But like a life partner, right? Like someone that will go on the run with him when needed, right? And not, you know, not just in this like puppy love kind of way, but so I feel like those discoveries when writing a novel are one of the reasons why I think like I only want to write like novels for as long as I live. Like with short stories, I always end things like too shallow. Like some people are just amazing at it. Like some people just have the gift of like writing short stories, making things like succinct and beautiful. And I don't know what's up with me, but I just can't do it. Like whenever I write a short story, it's like, okay, well, there's something huge missing here. And instead of going back and fixing the thing that's missing, I'm like, okay, I'll just write 15 more pages. Okay, I'll just write 15 more pages. And then like it just grows. So, and it's that discovery. It's like the figuring out what's missing and trying to, especially like in characters, trying to like fill it in is what attracts me to it. And like actually why I feel that, I don't know, like all of us writers are really lucky to be able to do this stuff. But yeah, it's like that's what I get to do with my life is just figure out these imaginary characters. Like it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, we're really glad you're doing it. I love that you mentioned the process of discovery, because that's so often how I talk about writing essays is like, you're discovering as you go. Like where, you know, it's not the case. It's never the case for me. And I don't think it's the case for most essayists. I know that like they know where they're going when they start something, and that the process of writing is the discovering and figuring it out. And like for my part, I can't write an essay that's under like 10,000 words. It's terrible. They're so long. Part of it is because I have this like, what's exciting about writing is that discovery, and that, you know, it's hard to do that in a short space sometimes. People can do it, but I think it's a different kind of mind that can like keep things really succinct and have an entire world exist in 1,000 words, 2,000 words. I can't do it.
And I mean, that's actually, I loved that your essays were long. Actually, you're like really sitting with something.
Oh,
well, yeah, everyone just has different stuff, right? Different stuff that feels like clicks and
I think, do we have time for one more question? I don't even know if we have one more question in the box.
I think maybe one more, but I should also, I guess, some behind the scenes work is my computer is at 2% and my charger is
we don't want to push it. Well, if someone has a really quick last question. Oh, we got one.
If I disappear, that is why. If I disappear. Oh, what is on your hat?
Important follow-up. Yeah, what's on your hat?
Okay, so this is the buffalo. I lived in Buffalo for 3 years, and this is the buffalo bison, except it's been co-opted by a local rap group. And so, as you can see, the bison is wielding a spiked bat. And it's normally just a regular bat.
Right.
Yeah.
The buffalo bison is something that I'm still wrapping my head around. The buffalo bison.
The biggest minor league stadium I actually don't know if that's true. It's a very big minor league stadium in this league.
Nice. All right. Well, I think that probably wraps us up.
Yay!
We're back.
I had some tech difficulties, and then I pulled off my earrings. Like, I can't do this. Great. Yeah.
There's a chance I go dark in a few seconds.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for this conversation. I wrote a lot of notes myself. It was really beautiful to have you all here. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Once again, just want to let you know you can buy the book by clicking that teal button, and I put other links to the books that the authors mentioned in the chat too. So just shop with us. Jeff Bezos is gone, and you can be too, you know? So yeah, thank you all so much, and have a good rest of your evening.
Yeah, thanks, Ida. And then hopefully see you maybe soon, Melissa. Maybe see